All right, folks, 8:02, February 5th. We're going to open the Wenham Finance and Advisory Committee. I see present is myself, the chair. The rest of the members could just sound off.
David Dogger.
So Bob and Dan, are you there?
Anna was here.
All right, great, thanks. Okay, so I've got the agenda on the screen here, and not hearing any reason to go out of order. We'll just start with the first one here. So we have public comment as the first thing here, and I'm happy to take comments from folks that are on the phone. Also happy to throw it at the end of the meeting. It may be that some of these questions that you have or concerns might be addressed, but I'm happy to start with any public comment.
And Jared is on now too.
All right,
Happy
Jared.
to wait to the end if you'd rather have it that way.
Cheers. Okay. Well, thanks. I think Angus, you are the only member of the public on the line, so we will make sure to come back to you. All right. So the third thing we have on the agenda is the discussion of the Cutler School building project. I think Jeff would have sent along to the Finance Committee members a draft of the deck with a whole bunch of changes that we had discussed last week. One of the things I'd like us to do is to scroll through it, think about what we're seeing, any open items that are left, and kind of agree on the central model assumptions that we're going to use in coming to an opinion or recommendation for the select board. I'd like us to consider setting a motion to vote on that opinion during this meeting, but depending on how the discussion goes, I understand we might end up having to delay. So I don't know if other committee members have any other comments before I start going through the deck. Any new news?
This is Bob. Jeff sent out a debt schedule with impact, and I was wondering what the rate was for that, so we could compare that to the rates that you used in the deck.
Jeff, I think Jeff and I spoke. I backed into it and saw that it used a 4.5% rate. So I have updated the model in the Excel model, but not necessarily all the sensitivity analyses that are in the discounting cash flow that's in the deck. Instead, realizing that I was just going to spin my wheels and have to change it again and again and again if we decided to change our central assumptions, I thought we would keep the model open, the Excel model open, and as we're going through the deck and perhaps if there are any other changes, we'd put that into the Excel model before I go and redo all those sensitivity charts.
Just wanting to confirm, the rate that Jeff sent out was 4.5%.
That's it. They didn't give me the specific rate, Bob, but that's much like Finn. That's what I sort of backed into. I do have a request into Vinny just to get the actual true interest cost, the tick rate that we typically get. But I believe it's 4.5 is what we're looking at with a level principal payment structure.
Thank you.
Are we going to go slide by slide, or are you just looking for comments?
So you'll notice that I took all the red flags that we put on the slides last week, right? And where I addressed them, I turned them green to kind of show to you, version control that, that the comments that you had for me, I incorporated into the slide. But there are a few red tags still yet to be addressed.
The only thing I just in scrolling through it, I thought we agreed that one of the illustrations was going to be a sample, maybe I missed it, of what the increase in the tax rate was going to be for a sample home. In
Yeah,
other
that's one of my
words,
red tags still in the deck is I wasn't I didn't have that to hand when I sent the latest version to Jeff.
okay,
Yeah, and we do I sent something, I don't know if it was yesterday or today, that showed, the bond amortization schedule, and then shows the, the annual tax rate impact, over each year of the bond payment, and then an average sort of blended, rate as well. And then I actually have something, in a Excel I'm going to be showing tonight that has a very rough start at what it does for this year, and also projects out for, say, the first 10 years.
okay, and then a fellow citizen had commented to me that they were concerned about the assumption vis-a-vis the demographic, percentage Wenham versus percentage Hamilton, and I, I, I get, at what point do we make a cutoff as to what, or does the respective towns, do a demographic calculation and say, okay, 40% of the students were from Wenham, therefore we have 40% of the cost versus 60% from Hamilton?
Yeah, so this is currently based on a 34.08 Wenham allocation and a 65.92% Hamilton allocation, which is what they're using as the apportionment factors right now. That it could change between now and when the bond is actually issued. I haven't done an exhaustive look into this, but I don't think there's been a stretch where Wenham was at 40, or that Wenham was at 27 or 28 either. I think this is sort of ballpark where we're going to be, but the apportionment gets looked at at the time we actually execute the bond.
So it's literally done at the date of the execution of the bond?
Yeah, I'll double check it in the agreement. I know in Manchester and Essex when we did it, it was actually each so we did multiple. I think we locked in like $30 million right up front, and there was one apportionment factor. Then when we locked in the rest of the debt, there was a different factor, which in our case it didn't work out as well for Essex. But so you could also have that issue here, but we could go up or down as well depending on my sense is here we'll just keep rolling short-term bands given where interest rates are at, and wait till the very end to lock in an actual bond, going to market, because rates are higher now, and you hope they're going to drop at some point. We
Okay.
had the reverse in
But
Essex where rates were low.
if highly theoretical, but if during the term of a bond, let's say it's a 7-year bond, the demographics go, we end up with 40% of the students in the school, do we adjust the debt service, or is it fixed as of the date of the issuance of the bond? This is what this person asked me.
I will double check that for you.
Okay.
I believe if my experience in the past is these things are locked in at the time of the bond, which there can, obviously, yeah, if we were to lock in when we were at 37% and then, we saw a shift down to 30, that could be problematic. I know we've experienced this year, we're experiencing an uptick in apportionment. And and it's somewhat painful, but it's, it's not like we're talking, going from a 66-34 split to a 60-40 split in most cases. But yeah, we can get a more definitive answer on out of the school agreement for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments before we start going through this deck? All right. Throw it up on the screen. I'm going to save it as today's date. All right. What is today? Today's the 5th. Okay. Right. So, like I said, the way that I typically run decks when I'm doing stuff for work, right? When I put a flag up on the right, I don't get rid of it. I turn it green to tell my boss I'm done, right? And then he doesn't lose that he asked for something to be changed, right? So this is the same sort of thing, right? So, um, there were no comments here about the background, right? That we're a finance committee and that we're just looking at the finance aspects of these things, right? So the comment here was that we needed to do not a straight line bond, but the flat principal plus interest bond, which is the Excel file that Jeff sent out to everybody, right? So I changed the model to point at that instead. And I kept the old numbers in here just to give you a little bit of contrast about how that's different, right? So a straight line bond for $92 million at 4%, right? Was 8.6. Let's see, that should say 4.5s, guys. I'm sorry about that, right? Let's go back into the Excel model, right? Basically, when you do this straight line bond, the point is that we materially increase the amount of money that is due from the citizens in the first year, right? So 4.5 is a $7.1 million annual payment. And if you go and you do if you do the level principal, right, it starts at 8.79, 8.78, and then drops over time, right? So here is the model as we've got it out there, right? So here's the level principal, right? It starts at $8.79 million, and then it drops every single year until in the year 20, it's nearly half as big as it was in year 1, right? That's very different from a level debt payment where you're paying $7.1 million every year, right? So I kept this line in here just to give you that insight as we thought about this this thing here. So my plan is to basically, I don't know if you guys have any comments, but my plan is to just delete out this row and keep the one that's currently in yellow and get rid of that highlighting. Right.
Yeah, one kind of question on my side would just be for pure clarity perspective. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I obviously understand the full context,
Mm-hmm.
but so we know Hamilton Wenham residents would issue a bond for 92 million. But I could suppose somebody could read the 8.28 million number and say that's Wenham's share.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
don't know if anyone has any concerns on kind of that. I can't decide if I'm like overthinking that or not, but just trying to be very clear to the taxpayers of Wenham.
Mm-hmm. Right. So would issue a bond for 92 million, right? So we could put in some sort of comment here about only about a little more than a third would actually, if I can stay vague here, right? Because we're
Yeah.
staying at the high level, right? We're saying
Yeah.
for the entire project for most of the stuff, of which a little less than 40% would be Wenham's responsibility. All right. So basically it's a much higher payment in year 1, right? And then the other comment here, right, is that is about the consolidation of the schools and the economic savings related to that. Right, so no major changes here.
Finn, I think we need to be careful about the percent you're putting there because 40 is quite a bit higher than 35, and people may start rippling that number to apply it to other things.
Okay. Right. I mean the the fact of the matter, the way we've written this is that it doesn't matter what Wenham's responsibility is or Hamilton's responsibility. We're talking about the cost of the project as a whole, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, does it make sense to just kind of put that disclaimer right in front? Sort of this entire analysis is sort of a macro level analysis, and the Wenham taxpayer impact, will be provided, as part of sort of the other, documentation. But you're just doing it at the much more global level here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jared had said he wanted to add a tax slide at the end.
Yes.
So we need, those two would be sort of incompatible.
I mean, you could put something that says, in the appendix, you'll find, a projected tax impact schedule for Wenham residents. But I think I'm just thinking in the body, it will be hard to keep kind of bouncing back and forth and referencing some stuff at the Wenham level and other stuff at the global level.
Right. Well,
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the things here, right, is we might just say we're assessing the project as a whole. We're not separating the town's responsibilities until the very end, say after the recommendation page, where we might throw in a slide about impact to Wenham residents. Okay, so the only comments here were to put the keep the options 1, 2, and 3 in order constantly through the deck, right? So I've gone through and done that, right? So here we are talking about a let's see, this is 3.5, right? So this option 1, right, is talking about the limp along, basically showing that at $15 million or $2.5 million a year, right? Again, I have done this, right. So these are essentially that we have a bond immediately, or sorry, let me restate that we have that limp along for 7 or so years, and then come back in 7 years, and we are giving the benefit of the doubt to say that interest rates kind of drop down to a more historic levels of 3.5%, right? But again, it's it's interesting. Again, when you do the straight line, it means a lot less payments in year 1, right? So I'll get rid of that highlighting here. So one of the things I wanted to point out, right, is this 3% inflation, right, that we're assuming on the construction. As I went down and started saying, all right, well, this is the source that we use to determine inflation rates in the future. I remember, I think it was Dave, you were saying that in the projects that you've done, you were using a kind of a flat assumption of about 3% a year, right? And that was sort of the norm pre-COVID, pre-inflationary time period. But when I went down and started actually grabbing some of these slides that are common with the town of Hamilton's presentation, I couldn't get anywhere near a 3%, right? This was closer multifamily housing, right? Probably a little bit more in your experience, perhaps. But this MSBA cost per square foot, from 2010 to 2019, the cost inflation was 7%, and then in 2019 it jumped to 12, which is the craziness we've been feeling recently. So I kept the comment about 3% in the file here, but I wanted to have us revisit that that comment. I mean, 3% I think is not been something that MSBA has seen in at least since 2010. I don't know if folks had comments on that or thoughts.
Well,
Yeah,
go
I'll just
ahead.
say my 3% number was purely based on conversation I had with people in the construction industry, I frankly don't have anything to say that's a right number, wrong number. I personally kind of like it because it is like fairly conservative and I think gives a good shot to the other options. But I'm not wedded to the number at all, and I think your numbers are, don't have any material
well,
issues.
I agree with that because otherwise, if we take the alternative, you know, and use the historical numbers, you know, we'll be potentially being accused of padding, you know, trying to pad the case for the new school, whereas we're reinforcing the case for the new school by using a number that arguably is too conservative.
Mhm. Right. Well, I've got the inflation model. I mean, just using again. Now this is using 4%, not 4.5% on the loan, for the as proposed, right? But you can see that every 2% adds, you know, a little less than, what is it? A little less than $10 million, to the one school in 7 years, and adds, you know, 15 million or more to the other two options. So it's pretty, it's a material assumption, right? It's one of the more material, it's got the highest sensitivity, um, to this variable. But I'll keep it in here for now, and then go back to where we were talking about it, right? So this is the resubmit the school. So we still have the 3% inflation, right, in this model. So option 2, right? Again, we grabbed this is that you try for 2 schools in the new sites, 2 sites in 7 years, right? We still have the 7-year wait, $2 million to get into the grant program. Again, limp along, and the $2.5 million a year. We replace both schools. The least expensive option that we have there is basically a combined $209 million, right? And a straight line bond at a much lower interest rate than we're experiencing now. 1% is $11.5 million an annual, right? And the flat principal starts at 14 and then declines to a little more than 9. So much bigger numbers here. So we'll get rid of that highlighting. Right. All right. So option 3 is renovating Cutler and Winthrop, right? You're asking what are we getting for the 94 million? So got in here, right? The 94 million, it basically covers the ADA compliance, like ramps, hazardous material removal, but won't include any increase in capacity, utilization, HVAC, right? And to do all that is really the $209 million option from option 2, right? So we are saying that we would go and do immediately the Cutler, right, which is I think about 44 million or 40. Let me double check that here because I got 46 here, and I think that's a correction. New Cutler and Winthrop, right? 44 million, so it's not 46. Take that number, correct it here. Right, 44 million, and then this is 46 respectively, and so this is $90 million total. Right, and then construction. Right, so we took this number down. So we'd have 2 bonds, right? And that gives us, for 20 years, basically, we've got 2 different bonds. So the language starts getting a little complicated here, right? Where we start in year 1 payments of 4 million and 3 million, but there's 7 years offset for when they'd start, right? And they drop to 2.5 and 194 in year 20. All right. And then the final comment here about, you know, we'd be bringing these 2 schools to code, but for them to last, you know, 20 plus years, we're going to need to kind of put in another $100 million over the next 20 years, in maintenance and improvements to handle, you know, the currently 70-year-old buildings. All right, so I'm going to drop in the number here. Like I said, I did not go through and take these values and put them in, right? So if I take you'll see here, right? I've got the 4.5% interest rate, the 3% construction inflation, right? 44 million and 46 million for Cutler and Winthrop in the 2 code option, right? If we drop this in, right, you can see where we land currently. Right. So with another, when you add another 0.5% of interest to the bond schedule, right, for the as proposed, it takes it so that they're it's actually $1 million more, right? I think it adds $2.5 million of cost at a 6% discount rate to the as proposed. So, and then there was a discussion here about adding a discount rate discussion slide in the appendix, so we can go to that next. Right. I don't know if there are any thoughts or comments here.
I think we get to the right answer no matter what, so I'm not gonna quibble too much, but I think the real rate is closer to like 4%, 3.75% for the interest right now for like a 20-year muni. I was literally over at our muni desk today asking that question, so it's kind of my caveat. I'm okay with 4.5% because again, I don't think it changes the final answer here.
Okay. All right. So this language I'll change here, which is basically that the as proposed, it stays the least expensive until about 5.5% discount rate, right? Right around here, it switches when the delay for 7 years option becomes cheaper fiscally, right? And that these 2 years bring to code or 2 schools in 7 years are never competitive financially, right? So with these assumptions, all right, so let me go to the discount rate discussion, right? And obviously I didn't drop in the new number here either. So right. So there was, you're basically asking for discussion about how do we decide which discount rate we're going to use as the base point for our sensitivity analysis, right? So just explaining briefly what the discount rate is, dollars worth less in the future than it is now, and that residents really have to consider their own situation as I review the chart above. We're electing to use a 6%, right, as reasonable and for the base for the sensitivity models, right? And so if you believe that, inflation is going to get down to 3%, right, and that's your metric for determining, a discount rate, then you'd be down here. If you are a resident who's thinking about, the cash that you send to the town in form of property taxes could be used instead for your own savings, right? Then you might be at this 6% rate, which is kind of where the stock exchange has yielded over the last few decades after taxes. Or if you're a resident that's, needs would select a much higher discount rate because of their short-term cash needs, or you believe that inflation is going to increase, or some other reason where you'd elevate your desire to delay the investment in the school system. Right, but basically it still stands that the 2 schools or the bring to code are never as competitive as a single school now or in the future. So I'll get rid of that flag here. Let's see. I kept this flag here on the interest rate assumption slide because I wanted to figure out, where I could, what the right source document is for this, Jeff. Is this just, as I've written here, that the owner's project manager advises a proper interest rate is going to be 4.5%. Is that sufficient as a source
Yeah,
document
I
for
mean,
us?
technically, it's probably like Hilltop Advisors or their, you know, their bond advisors. But the owner's project manager is actually getting that info from them. So maybe that, I think owner's project manager is probably fine.
Okay. Right, get rid of that flag here. All right, let me go back up to the top here. All right, so this is the flag that you were asking about, Jared, right? We still need a slide that basically says, all right, once we've made a recommendation, right, for, in this case, the as proposed, right, then I think we need a slide here afterwards. It says we're making a recommendation and the impact to the taxpayer is such and such.
Yes, we definitely, in my opinion, need to have that in there. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Jared, do you think that's the one pager I sent out there would be just sufficient to drop in there?
Absolutely. As long as it just somebody gets to see at the end, you know, a $500,000 house with a current tax bill of X is going to have, as a result of this, all else being equal, an increase of X percent or X dollars.
Mhm.
You know, with the assumption that, again, a concern was voiced about, you know, when do you do the split, you know, the cost split. um, and I understand you don't want to confuse the macro presentation, but at some point you have to tie the cost of the taxpayer and the cost split between the two towns, because a concern was voiced to me that, you know, Wenham is going to have increasingly more kids and therefore we're going to pay more in taxes. Because of the cost split, whether it's adjusted annually or whether it's simply fixed for the term of the bond.
I think that, I mean, unless you're going to sort of like, I mean, that seems to be a little dicey for us to be trying to project out what our split of the district will be in 10 years. I mean,
I
I mean,
agree.
I get the concern, but
I agree, but
how do you model that?
I don't know, and I agree, but I guess all I'm saying is if you can tell them that the cost split, that this presentation assumes a cost split of X, okay? At least so it's laid out there. And then if somebody says, well, how do you get the number and how's it going to change over time? I assume there's a procedure on an annual basis to address that. No, for at least for the operating budget.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's like a 3-year average of a couple different factors. You know, and my one pager does, you know, reference the 65 or, you know, 65 or 66-34 split. And, you know, we certainly could put something in there that says, you know, this does change year to year. And we could pull, you know, whatever the last 10 years, um, you know, of apportionment factors and sort of average them out and say, you know, just kind of give people a range. You know, I mean, we
Well,
range from
I don't know if you have to go that
33.7.
far, but or that's if that's not a huge lift, that would be of interest. But it's more a question of, at least, you know, in the town meeting, somebody says, how did you get this split? That we have, as a factual matter, we can say it's done in the following fashion.
Yep.
Let's see. And then my only other question was, did we, and I mean, I got on the call late, but did we get the final numbers from the school committee?
So the one pager I sent you is the most recent MSBA negotiation and then a
Oh,
new
okay.
bond run on that. And it's, you know, honestly, very, very close. The total cost of the project went up about 488,000 net.
Okay.
But, you know, when you pull that out over
And
20
is that
years, it's
incorporated in
pretty
this
minimal.
document?
What's that?
Is that incorporated in the deck that Finn has just done?
Right. Yeah, I
I-
took the numbers from Jeff, right? 142.27 and a grant of 49.78, right? And the 4.5% interest rate.
Okay. And then, sorry, my last comment would be, and this can be dealt with in the form of a appendix comment. Somebody, in the two public meetings that I've been to, a construction engineer or somebody who purports to be one has gotten up and made the generic comment, "These costs are crazy." And we all agreed when we started this project that we were not construction engineers. We were not going to opine as to the cost per square foot calculations that were done. Those are done by the owner's rep and the architect. And we should just have something that makes sure we deflect that argument, to the owner's rep, because we're not construction engineers.
Yeah, and I remember the gentleman you're talking about that spoke at the meeting at the high school. You
And
know,
there
he
was
sounded
also
like
one
certainly
at
he
one of
was
the 5 board meetings that did the same. But anyway.
okay. But yeah, I would question whether his, experience is completely in the public, domain with, the procurement laws we operate under and things like that. And I think these school projects are these MSBA school projects are, they're higher than normal, I would say. It's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, I think we do have to address it, because I do think some people, just look at it and say that this is pie in the sky numbers. It can't be right. Which is why, like, I thought us kind of just saying, our, HVAC, our HVAC at town hall, just how staggeringly high that is, just because of the world we have to operate in.
Well, it's the magic 2 words. It's prevailing wage, as Dave Nigro said at the presentation. My point is we should deflect that. Just say, please refer to Dave Nigro and who will explain prevailing wage to you if you wish. In other words, we don't want to even touch that one and say, well, trust us, it's really expensive. That's not the kind of argument we want to be making. I'm just trying to make sure, because I like the presentation very much, and I just want to make sure we don't end up in a rabbit hole in some public forum over construction costs.
Okay. All right. So I'll put that in the comment, and I'll probably put that in the background. Figure out how to fit that into the background here at the opening statement, right? About what the process is that we're going through, right? Okay. Right, let's see these other flags we have, right? So I'll update this this summary of the cash flows, right? Slide with the new values, right? You can see that I dropped in this. Actually, sorry, I have dropped it in with the 4.5, and I just got this flag here because I kept the flat principal or the straight line in the very last slide, right? To contrast how different it is, right? It really front end loads the cost of the project when we do this, right? Adds $1 million or more in the first few years in all these options. So,
Vin, didn't we talk about putting the option numbers on the choices?
oh, you wanted the option numbers here? Okay.
Yeah, and that might that might affect your title. It says 4 options, because at the beginning you gave 3, so you could just drop the 4 and say for the options, and then put or the new school now, and then option 1, option 2, option 3.
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. I'll put that over here on the left, as proposed, right, and go through there. This flag is just something that I figured that we might be adding or removing slides on all the assumptions, right? And so I just wanted a flag to remind myself not to mislabel those as we change those around, right? And then the only one that I don't have a source document for is the commitment from the school that they're going to open the doors on September of 2028. I couldn't figure out where to get that. I don't know, Jeff, you might be able to send me some document that I can source that from.
Okay.
All right. And then let's see. Right. And then so this was the correction by about $2 million in each one of these schools, down from I think 46 and 48 to the 44 and 46 you see here. Right. And I want to emphasize that all these models here haven't been updated because I wasn't sure where our assumptions were going to go during this meeting. Sorry, I've just been invaded by a small child. I'm in a meeting. I gotta go. So I gotta go. Okay. Jeez.
You know, it might be. That's,
Sorry. Go
that's
ahead,
the
Bob.
dog. I'm sorry. I was going to say, it might be worth just putting this on 2 slides and
Mhm.
making it a little bit less cluttered. And it would also make the boxes bigger so that when, the presentation is made, people in the audience can see it better, because some of the stuff the school committee put up wasn't readable even from the first couple of rows of the audience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And then these two are the slides we're going to get rid of. They're just the old straight line bond schedule and the old assumptions table of contents. So getting rid of those. All right. So we'll add another slide, or break this Cutler and Winthrop cost slide in half, and that should take us to how many slides total here? We're talking about 10 slides in the body and about 10 slides in the appendix. Um, when we talk about the size of this deck. I hope we can keep people's attention that long.
Is it possible somebody's going to ask us as to why we're using level principal versus level payment?
Um, I think one of the things that Jeff and I were talking about here was that how, if your personal discount rate is very high or very low, you'll prefer a straight line or principal plus interest bond in some cases, right? If you really have a personal discount rate that's very high, you need cash now, then you are not going to want to have accelerated, payments, right? You'd prefer the straight line bond that, pushes the a lot of the payments out to far in the future. But if you have
Right. No, my question was, if somebody asks why this is the only alternative included, do we want to, have we covered ourselves on a disclaimer that, that's not one of the things within our purview, if that's the case?
as to why, so we're using the bond schedule that the owner's rep provided
Right.
us, right? Essentially.
Yeah, and technically, it's the finance office at the school has provided it. So I think, we can only. I think what we would say, Bob, is we can only go with the information that's provided to us. We're not the actual client. We're not the one working with the bond advisor. If this is how they typically do things, we're analyzing the information as it's given to us. I think we do have some ability to have some input when we actually get to the point of issuing bonds. I know in my district it works that way. The finance committee and treasurer in each town were involved with the decision on whether to go level principal or not. But that's something that may change in a couple of years when we actually issue this. But I think right now it's the information that's been provided to us, and so that's the information we're running with.
Right. No, all I'm saying is, I'm not saying that we should get involved. I'm just saying to make it clear that that was a given to us as opposed to something that we're opining on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can throw a disclaimer in there that just says, at debt service schedule, as provided by, owner's project manager and school building committee,
Mhm.
and leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll grab a box and put it in there. Maybe we'll fit it in here. In the first New school as proposed. Oops, did it again.
And Jared, I'm reading through the school district agreement right now, and they actually amended the agreement at one point so that the capital costs, which would include debt payments, would be allocated in the same manner as operating costs. But there's an additional paragraph that says the committee shall consider circumstances at the time of any proposed debt to use essentially another apportionment formula. So I think this is a question.
Well, that's a time bomb.
Yeah. And I think, and to some degree, Hamilton as well could look at this and say, we'd like some stability over this, that we don't want to, have, annual payments that swing dramatically due to apportionment changes. So I think it might be worth, both towns to at least explore the option of tying in, at the time of issuance. And they could probably make it as specific or sort of flexible as they want. So, you could use larger, a lot of times things are based on 3-year student population rolling averages. We could, propose that maybe for the purpose of this, you use 6 or 8-year rolling averages. So it smooths it out a little bit more and you don't have such pronounced, swings and apportionment factors throughout the debt payment.
Jeff, well, A, thank you for looking that up. And B, did I hear correctly that basically there was a one sentence at the end says we can do this any way we want in the future if we feel like it? I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read. Yeah, so the last sentence says, provided, however, that the committee shall consider the circumstances at the time of any proposed debt and may initiate for acceptance by the member towns as provided under Section 6, an amendment to this agreement calling for some other apportionment formula specific for the specific capital cost. So there's this sentence here that says capital costs will be allocated based on operating apportionment. So if you had a $50,000 improvement to the cafeteria, you would just lump it in and apportion it like any other operating cost. But when you have something of this magnitude, you could agree under the terms of the regional agreement to try to find something to maybe tighten that up. Because you could, for us, you could be looking at a swing from 33 to 36%, and then the flip would apply to Hamilton as well. So my thought is either you lock it, we propose we lock it in at that rate. But some might say that's not fair either. So maybe the interim, or the kind of middle ground solution is to use a longer rolling average student population, which would smooth out the variability a little bit.
Well, I don't disagree, but I think I think the select board needs to be made aware of this to make sure that that it's their understanding that they, on behalf of the town, have to agree to whatever revision to the formula is made.
What I can do is send an email to tomorrow morning or tonight, referencing this paragraph and saying, the finance committee discussed this tonight, and we would like to get some clarity around the potential apportionment options as it relates to this, to this debt.
In other words, I don't think it's appropriate for the school committee to simply decide on behalf of the two towns how that apportionment is going to be made. That's a decision that the town needs to make or needs to agree to. That's all.
I mean, by operation of the agreement, it's the school committee that does that, but you would have to have input from the member towns. I mean, obviously, if the both select boards were putting pressure on them to do it, they're going to do that. I mean, there's no real impact to them in terms of it's not, you know, if we're moving forward with it, it's really just, you know, who's paying what share. They should be willing to work with the select board. So I think putting it on Steve's radar and the select board's radar, I think they need to talk to Joe and the select board over in Hamilton and sort of iron this out ahead of time. But I think it's
I
good that there's
agree, and
this.
thank you for uncovering that.
Sure.
All right, we've gone through the whole deck. I'm going to drop in the sensitivity analyses, you know, now that we've updated where the baseline is, and we'll get that out to everybody probably after Jeff has kind of dropped in the tax implication into this box here. I don't know, Jeff, could you throw the tax implication work that you've been doing onto the screen?
Sure. Let me switch over to here and
And Finn, I was quickly looking on the FAQs on the Hamilton Wenham like school elementary school project. They say they expect the school to be used for the 2028-2029 year.
Okay. All right, I'll go grab that.
Yeah, it's the hwschools.net HW elementary project FAQs.
Okay, thanks.
all right. So, I think I've switched over. You guys seeing the sheet
Yeah.
with the blue grid here? So this is actually sort of the way I did it in Excel. It's backwards. So page 2 is sort of the place to start, but this is the background of how we got to the numbers we're going to see in a minute. So on the 3rd, we got an email. This is the end product of the, for those of you who weren't there or didn't hear, the change that was made was, I guess there were some changes made between the cafeteria space versus the space of the gym. At the suggestion of the MSBA, we made those changes to the plans, submitted them. It increased the project cost a little bit, but at the end of the day, the project is now just over 142, almost 142.3. The reimbursement is just above 49.8, and you can actually see the reimbursement rate up there, 51.28%. And it's not 51.28% of the project. It's just 51.28% of the cost they deem eligible for, for reimbursement. So you see, we moved from the 142 number down to the 92,488 number there. Then we used the apportionment numbers that are part of this year's operating budget, the 65.92 and the 3408. And based on that, this is the amortization schedule that works out. You can see that's the level principal there. And so those are your, and actually I did throw it on the bottom there too, that you can see before it was going to be about a $92 million bond. So the project is, the net bonding has gone up, just under $490,000 over time. So this is sort of the background that goes to page 1. And so here, I think I might rejigger how some of this is laid out to put it into the deck. But this is just showing you, what's the allocation of total debt service, principal and interest. In the middle here, you've got, this is the FY25 certified town values in Wenham. The total value is what drives the tax rate. And then you have your average, single family and your median single family home. And so I think this is what makes the analysis a little more complicated to present to people, because it's this descending payment. So, the worst case scenario is year 1, where the tax rate impact is $2.18 on the tax rate. So in year 1, you're looking at, just under 2,200 for of someone living in an average single family home, which is slightly over $1 million assessed value. For the median taxpayer, it's just under 2,000, and that's for a nearly, about $891,000 home. And then, we add this per $100,000 for folks, so you can at least do a down and dirty kind of calculation for yourself. I have a $700,000 home. It's going to be 7 times 218. It's probably a $1,500 increase for me. So we carry that through for the whole year. I mean, you can see the difference, year one, it's 2,200. By the final year, it's, just over 1,200. And when then down the bottom here, we just throw that average for folks to see that over time it's about $1.69 on the tax rate, and about 1,700 to the average taxpayer and 1,500 to the median. The big sort of caveat here is that this is all based on the FY25 certified valuations. So as any of you have looked at your tax bills in the last 2, 3, 4 years, know your personal experience relative to the valuation of the town is going to change over that 20-year period, probably multiple times. So this is really just a snapshot in time of what we think the taxpayer experience would be, all things being equal, but it's going to obviously fluctuate over that 20-year time frame.
But it's the best you can do, and I think it's very well laid out. This is showing that all other things being equal, this particular project as proposed are going to have the following, cost effects. I think it's great.
Yeah, this is how I tend to do things. I think it's, sort of, it's obviously easier when it's just a one-time, 1-year simple thing and you can just lay it out. But yeah, I mean, the best you can do is lay it out for people and I'm not trying to minimize this at all. These are absolutely positively material impacts on a tax bill. And certainly they're going to be much higher for some people and, slightly lower for others. But yeah, I think, obviously, I like the approach you folks have taken, this kind of global level look at the project that Finn's kind of spearheaded. And then, then you come down to saying, well, if you move forward with it, here's what we think the impact is to you. And as I mentioned, there's a spreadsheet I have that then sort of tries to extrapolate this out over sort of a 10-year period. To sort of to Dano's point of what you vote for today is not that's not it, that you want to understand what this looks like 5 years out, 10 years out. I think that's helpful to people too, and frankly, this is the largest spend I've ever been around, either as a finance committee member or a town accountant. So I think the more information we can throw at people, the better.
Jeff, I think it'd be helpful to someplace at the top indicate that this is a level principal, what the interest rate is, and also state that the term is 20, even though, somebody could figure out by looking at the table. The second thing is for the slide, you might want to consider, instead of having all 20 years showing, do it every 5. So the thing is actually more readable on the slide.
Okay, yeah, I'll noodle around with that. I mean, it's always I just went through this with the capital slides I put together for the select board. How to get stuff in a way that's useful yet readable for people, which I'm sure Finn has been struggling with on the deck we've been looking at tonight. But yeah, I can sort of work it up a little bit, Bob, and even send it over, and you can give me your thoughts back on if that's kind of what you're looking for, and if you have some other suggestions on how to make it more readable. My big thing is just not wanting to say well, on average it's going to be $1,700, because what you don't want is for someone to get the first bill for $2,200 and say that's not what you told me at all.
I understand. I'm just trying to make something so that people, the presenter doesn't have to say on unreadable slide 7, you will see that the number is X, which is sort of the way some of the slides that have been presented on this project fall, that the slides are unreadable to anyone at any distance from the screen.
Right.
Right. So I think my goal is to, like I said, we're already at nine or so slides in the deck, in the body of the deck. So trying to get this communication down to a single slide is going to be my priority. Okay. Just going back to the agenda and looking at this, right? So we said we were going to discuss this school building project, and we've gone through the deck. I think the biggest change that I would say is that when we added the 0.5% interest rate up to 4.5%, it at the 6% rate, it moved it so that it was slightly less expensive to wait 7 years. So let me go back to that slide, throw it up on the screen. So, my sense is that basically changing the language, talking about the way that David, you were talking about it, where we've given these other alternatives, every advantage we can, right? By keeping inflation, back down to what it was pre-COVID, giving them, expecting interest rates to be much lower in the future, right? All of these other things. And as a result of that, it basically becomes competitive at the 6%, right? And then kind of offsetting that with in the recommendation language, right? What we've already discussed about how all of these future looking values or assumptions are all, really uncertain compared to the project as it's given now, right? That we know what the price of the new school is. We know that we can get back into the MSBA loan, right? That we can do it, right? We don't know all that stuff 7 to 10 years from now, right? So that's how I'm thinking about kind of tweaking the language with that shift that you're seeing on the screen now, right? It used to be green here, $2 million less, right? And smaller than this proposal.
Finn, I agree, and I like somehow the wording of at some place in here. I mean, all the other options involve shoveling money out, continuing to shovel money out the door, cost, with no quote unquote final result. At least in the case of the school, you get a state of the art physical asset. Hell or high water, and I think it's hard to not to overemphasize that value. So
Okay. Like I said, I'll tweak some of the language in the recommendation to align with what we just talked about there.
yeah, the new school option, in my mind, it would be something along the lines of the new school option secures a valuable educational asset for the town for the next 50 years at a fairly, quantifiable cost. The other options do not. Something like that is what I was struggling with.
Okay. Yeah, I'll work on that language and get this. Hopefully, final tweaks, so I don't have to keep doing it. Okay, so I think what I'd like to discuss now is a motion where the finance committee would take a stand on the proposal, and I'm thinking back to the language that we started talking about like last week, right? That was basically saying that we're rendering opinion based solely on the costs and assumptions that have really been handed to us from these experts, right, in the field, right, and taking them at face value, right, and then we have the owner's rep and what have you, but we're given these options really, and of these three options, we think that the as proposed is the least expensive option for the town, right? Bob, I think you're
And
talking, but you're on
secures a
mute.
valuable physical asset, for future generations.
So
No, but you mentioned the options. I think it's the same thing that we had before. That the current proposal is recommended above any of the three options looked at, because you don't want to fold it back into four options again. Just strictly wording.
okay. All right, so I'm gonna need some help on motion language that we could all. I'd prefer that all of us support. And Dano, I haven't heard too much from you tonight. So I know you have some of the most pointed kind of concerns here. So I want to work with you. I'd prefer to have a motion that is unanimous, but if we can't get there, I understand.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, Finn, since we talked last, and then tonight, just listening to everybody. And I appreciate you guys, uh, listening or respecting my point of view on the stuff. I feel like you tried to accommodate that with some of the verbiage in the presentation, which I appreciate. But as I've listened and thought through it today, like the general tone is that, this is the right thing to do for the town vis-a-vis the alternatives. And we could wordsmith and kind of say, well, we're just looking at what was given to us, or we could say we're just analyzing costs or whatever. But the general tone and the general sense of seems like most of the folks on the phone is that this is the best option for the town. And I generally don't think it is. Like, I think, what Jeff said about the Nahant example or some other example that much more drastic, it's much more difficult to implement. It would take, I don't know what it would take, but I don't think it's been sufficiently considered by the select boards. And so I think it'd be easier for you guys and for me to just let me vote against it and be, 4-1, and that's okay. I don't think we have to be unanimous. I think that would be more staying true to how I really feel and also not trying to water down how you guys really feel.
Mhm.
Anybody thoughts on that?
Dano, I was just going to say that I did sort of like knock around a little bit of like numbers and things on the Nahant example. And so, I looked at it real quick and, if we could enter into a tuition agreement like Nahant has with, Beverly or Danvers or something like that, what would be the impact? How much could we save? And if I said we would spend, say, $18,000 a student and we have, 500 and something students, you could potentially save, $2.5, $3 million over what we spend on the school budget now at a high level. The one challenge I would say we face, I mean, there's a few different challenges, but one of the challenges we face is that Nahant is only sending 140 students to Swampscott. We would be, because their model is they teach K through or pre-K through 5. If we kept things in our own district up until, say, 5th grade and then went to middle school somewhere else, that might be more appealing, but it would be difficult to, even for a Beverly to say, do you have room for 540 students, in a couple of Septembers? It could be challenging, but certainly there could be savings there, but that all would be predicated on that someone would take you in at 18,000 a student. It could be that it's 17, it could be that it's 19 or 20. But the challenge you might face is that it's a large enough number that it could require them to outlay capital too. But the thing you said that I had never really thought about before was, geez, if you move forward with the project, suddenly Hamilton Wenham is might be a more appealing partner because they come equipped with a brand new state-of-the-art school. So that you might almost weigh it. I felt like it made you less flexible moving forward, but I suppose you could make a case it could make you more flexible because you would be showing up with this new school. But that was just my quick take when I looked at it the other day.
No, yeah, thanks for looking at that again, Jeff. But I think that's the kind of analysis that we need to do, that not in the finance committee, because it's like you guys said, it hasn't been presented to us as an option. It's more of a political question. It has massive political implications, and I don't think the town would necessarily support it because we, like those of us on the phone, have a vision for what our town's supposed to look like. But I don't think that vision's viable 10 years from now or 15 or 20. And it's definitely not viable for the holistic, diverse, and healthy community that we aspire to. So anyway, I just don't think enough consideration's been given to that option. And yeah, like you said, maybe it is just the kindergarten through 5th grade that makes it work. Or maybe the assumptions are 25,000 versus 18,000 or 16,000. We haven't done that math. And then you got capital savings and other savings and repurposing and converting to mixed use and all kinds of upsides of not having semi capacity utilized buildings. And you could change the way you manage the district, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of options. It's just the bigger general point is our town is too small and people are having fewer babies and fewer people are moving into Massachusetts in general. And everybody in the state's going to face this. They're already facing it. We're going to face it more in the next 10, 20 years. And we're just lobsters in a boiling pot. And so anyway, that's my little soapbox. Sorry.
No, I hear you, Dano. I know I have been hearing your concerns, and you've been clear about them since we started working together. Um, and I know that you're interested in a wider scope set of responsibilities for the FinCom. So you know, I think we probably want to take that up. To honor your interests here. We can get through maybe the time crunch issues we've got now.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think we should just carry on and I should just vote against, the recommendation. And I think that's fine. I mean, whenever you do a warrant, you don't have to have unanimous. We got to vote on all the items in the warrant. Sometimes it's 4-1, sometimes it's 3-2. And our vote is just reflective of our general sentiment. It's not an actual, doesn't carry weight necessarily. It doesn't have, it's not a yes or no for the town. So I think it's okay for us to not be unanimous on this.
Sure.
Finn, may I just ask, when might there be an opportunity to ask a couple of questions or comments? You want me to wait?
No, I was just thinking about that, Angus, because we're coming to a motion pretty soon here, and I wasn't sure what you were particularly interested in commenting on. Is it school related, I assume then?
It's all school, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go
if
ahead.
it's-
I'll give you, I think it's appropriate to give you 3 minutes.
Okay.
And if you have any
Um,
questions, I'll try to respond and not.
It's mainly questions and a couple of comments. Having gone to the joint presentation, the number that stuck in my mind was, and in the numbers that Hamilton put together, was the percentage increase that the project would cost Hamilton. And it was eyeballed at 11 or 12%. It looks to me, if you could make that schedule, Jeff, that you're working on shows not just the dollar, but what's the percentage increase that represents that first year and last year to the taxpayer. And I know you got a median versus an average, but that would be very succinct number for people to put their teeth into and understand the consequences. But I should have preamble, Finn, what you've done here is wonderful. And I'm very impressed by this slide deck because it's going to reassure a lot of people that the numbers have been crunched by the FinCom, which is what I wanted to see. And I'm very impressed by what you've done here. It's just, I should have said that at the outset. So one is what you walk away with is, okay, this is the best that you can come up with. And it's going to cost me, it looks to me like 15% increase in our town tax bill on the stasis of number. Number two, I think, and this is going to be a hard one for you guys, but that December slide deck you put out with the longer term debt service and the drawing down of the 2.3 million free cash and the spike in 28 in our debt service, rolling this analysis and having your hands around by the time of the town meeting of what this is going to look like 2 and 5 years out. And I know there's a lot of moving parts, but the new union contracts, how they feed through the $10 million DPW building, if you can put the school in context, so we're not hiding from the taxpayer what Wenham is facing. And I think you're coming up with the best recommendation you can in a very difficult situation, but let's not gloss it over so the townspeople at least know what they're voting on. And I'm going to vote for this thing, but I think you want to have people fully informed. Two just other minor points. I do think the proportion that we pay is really critical because I think the demographics for the first time in some time, if you look at the last 3 years versus the last 10 or 20, is Wenham is rising as a proportion. And to Jared's point, if this is going to be something the school committee is apportioning and then going back to the select boards in 5 years' time when we're up to 45%, and they say we want 45% of this $90 million budget instead of just our 34%, it's going to be material. So I hope you guys button that one down. And maybe the last comment was I do think people are going to be wondering how do we accept the as-is numbers, that $90 million? I realize because Hamilton did not even show it on its options of having Winthrop upgraded. And it made some of us suspicious because they had been planning to pull the rug out from under us in 2 years and not have Winthrop renewed its lease. And as you, I'm sure, have seen, Hamilton is going to save somewhere between 7 million on capital up front from selling Winthrop 14 acres, and a $500,000 to $1 million lower expense to them than will be the case for us. And so their 12% may be why it's that extra $500,000 to $1 million that they're going to have off of Winthrop. Just be aware that some people are wondering, are we dealing with are they really being straight with us about like the upgrade costs? And I realize that's all you can take is what they've given you. That's all I have.
All right. Well, I appreciate your input, Angus. You know, I was just trying to make sure I hit the points back here, right? So, you know, first of all, yeah, I appreciate your comments on the deck. The goal is to make this to do what you described, to explain the process that the FinCom went through and explain, you know, the alternatives to the proposed school, and kind of show how we've come to the conclusion that they are more expensive. The comment about Winthrop, you know, we do not have a number that was ever vetted by an expert. You know, as you said, that was never a part of that process. For one reason or another, it was just never considered as viable, right? So we have used a number that's pretty comparable to Cutler, based off of, you know, comments by you know, by Eric, the superintendent, and the you know, the folks there at the school district, right, to say that, you know, it's probably going to be about the same because it's larger than Cutler, right? And so it's got more of the same problems. But, you know, we have had to, you know, make some assumptions, right?
Does
And
that
then
disturb you a little bit that they didn't? Because this is where it sort of smelt when they said, oh, they're going to make this money off of selling off the district,
yeah,
the
yeah.
building
So
that
that,
we could do.
yeah, I obviously, I do wish that we had that, right? So that we could give it as a viable option. But you know, you can see that if you, in the sensitivity analyses in here, if you add or subtract $10 million to what we assume it costs, it doesn't change the, you know, the conclusions that we would draw, right? If it is not 46 million, it's 36 million, it doesn't change it. If it's 26 million, it still doesn't change it, right? So the sensitivity analysis tells us that it's something I wish we had, but not having it doesn't mean we can't come to the same conclusion.
Okay, so can you show that on Jeff's schedule, that one-page schedule, that simple percentage, so that we have something that we can put our teeth in? I think it was $2,000 on a, what does that rate work out to on the average rate for a taxpayer in the next fiscal year?
So, you know, in year one, it's about a 13.4% increase. But that's muddled by that being the highest year. You know, if you were to look at, you know, the average tax rate impact is $1.69 over the 20-year time frame. We're looking at a $16.27 tax rate potentially for FY26 now. So, you know, over time, it's really closer to about a 10% increase, but it's a much larger increase in year one. I don't think John McGrath's deck gets into this nuance. It's much more just an average, you know,
Right.
amortization schedule. So his would probably be more in line with our average per year tax rate increase of 1.69. So we might be slightly lower at you know, something closer to you know, like 10%, a little over 10%. I'm trying to get back to that screen, but that's just, I'm just doing a quick calculation. It's not on that slide, but you know, we could certainly add it.
Great, thanks.
And, you know, on the comment about Winthrop, you know, I would agree there is a little bit of, you know, it doesn't quite smell right or whatever, but the only devil's advocate, you know, argument I might make is that, you know, we have one piece of property in the district and they have three large pieces of property in the district. So they have quite a bit more skin in the game than we do in terms of the property they've put in. So this is just, my 2 cents on that, but I agree. It would have been nicer to have, all of that information on the sort of up to code, in our hands, so we could, not be making a few assumptions here.
And Finn, that long-term deck that you had in December, are you going to have anything like that to show how you pull these parts together? It was one that showed a nice decline over the last decade in our debt service as a percent of operating budgets, but and putting off a spike by 2 years, 26, 27, but in 28, it surged back again.
Right. So
And-
there are 4 responsibilities that I believe the FinCom has this year. Right. It's usually just 3. The standout one is an opinion on this. Right. We're gonna be covering the operating expend budget, kind of the typical budget of the town, the capital expenditure budget, and informing the citizens of, sort of, you call it management's discussion analysis, or forecasting of things that folks need to be concerned about or thinking about, right? And so I'd put that, what you're describing, as something that I'd like us to have available at least in the for the town meeting, right?
Narrative.
Yeah, it may be something we
That's
can fit
actually-
in the warrant. So
That's great. Okay, thanks. I'm done, and thank you for giving me the time.
sure thing, no problem. All right, I'm going to go back to the finance committee. There isn't anybody else on the line. Let me just double check. I don't know how to check that. There it is, participants.
I don't. There's nobody else logged in or trying to
Okay.
log in.
Okay. So I've tweaked this motion language here, folks, and I'm looking for your thoughts ahead of moving forward with it. And I gotta make it bigger, guys.
Good. Thank goodness I had my cataract surgery. I like it.
I'm happy with the language.
Bob, you have any thoughts? I don't know, Bob. I don't know if you have any thoughts before we go to a vote
It
here.
looks fine. No, I was interrupted by someone who came in. I'm out in New York State, so we're visiting. So, no, that looks fine.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for someone to propose this motion.
I move that the Wenham Finance Committee conclude that the alternative available to the town and based on the cost estimates provided by the experts engaged by the Hamilton Wenham School District, the proposed new elementary school is the least expensive and least risky path to secure a viable long-term educational asset for the school district.
I'll second that.
Thanks, David. Any comments before we move to a vote? All right, then we'll go to a vote. Finn, aye.
Jared, aye.
Bob, aye.
David, I.
Right.
And
then
nay.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. And then we don't have any other members to abstain, so we've got it passing by 4-1 vote. Okay. Any other comments before we move to the next item on the agenda? I've got a little bit more work here to clean up the deck, but that's the deck that I'm hoping that we will be able to kind of approve either via email or through the next meeting as to go out with that motion.
Thank you for all your work on that.
Yeah, thanks, Finn.
Cheers, guys. All right. Well, you should be seeing the agenda on the screen. We can move to the next item, which is the fiscal year 26 operating budget.
All right, I'm going to steal the screen from you. I'll throw up an Excel spreadsheet with the budget. Right, and so I tried to sort of retool the operating budget spreadsheet based on some of the work that Bob had done. And so what you're looking at here is just a quick assumptions page at the front of this spreadsheet. So Bob had gone back and found, actual CPI numbers for, the last few years to come up with a 2-year or a 3-year actual CPI to then use. So to take either FY23 actuals and carry those out 3 years at a CPI of 17.91%, or to carry out the FY24 actual numbers at 11.97, the 2-year CPI number. And that is something I tried to do, in the past, but I think the way Bob does it, I really liked the way he sort of showed what was out of sort of the normal CPI bandwidth. And so I sort of rejiggered the model we have to show that. So what I'm going to send out to you folks tonight is this model that you can sort of work with. And it basically has this assumption tab, which isn't really a whole lot, but it does lay out those COLA assumptions. And then also the assessed value from FY24 and then 25, and then using the same numbers for FY26 for illustrative purposes, as well as the single home average family home and the median single family home to help you understand where the sort of tax rate and tax impact numbers are coming from. I've tried to dumb this down into just a few tabs instead of the other one had 30 tabs or something like that. And so what we have here is, we move from these assumption pages and move over to what I call the tax rate recap page, which is this just gives us the high level analysis of what we're spending, what money we are receiving in terms of receipts and state aid and those type of things, and then what money needs to be raised by taxation. And the bottom section here is showing you, well, what are you actually allowed to tax? And then finally determining whether you are, over or above the Prop 2.5 levy limit. And then down below here, breaking out those, tax rate impacts and the the average, median, and the per 100,000. And note that this is, the actual FY26 budget proposal. It does not include the Cutler debt, as that won't really hit this year, but is obviously a big part of our work to date and the discussions we've been having. This has been built into sort of a pivot table and a table kind of model. So we've got a couple of things here just to break it down real quick by, general government, public safety, and things like that. But what we've done based on sort of Bob's work is to show you, how does the budget compare, to the prior year, the FY25 budget. And so like in this case, general government is down, $38,000 over the prior year. But it also shows you, well, how does it compare to that FY23, that 3-year COLA target? And you can see it's actually above where we thought we would be just based on normal CPI. And same for the sum of the versus the 24 target, which is a 2-year CPI, we're above there as well. And so there's another tab here, which is kind of a filtered page where you can go through and you can see, you can select something like finance and not finance and advisory. You can select finance department, my department. And so you can see we're a department that we're up over where we would expect to be. And the reasoning for that, I should point out, there's one downfall to our accounting software, which is we don't capture wage detail based on the way our general ledger is set up. It's something I want to address and fix, but for now we're stuck with it. So, if you look here, it looks like, I'm way over budget compared to 23 and 24 because we don't have actual GL numbers for those. So in theory, we're up about $27,000 in wages over the target for 23. And sort of what I've tried to do for folks is to put in here some notes, which is, a decision was made to make the assistant town accountant position, which was a part-time position, a full-time position in FY24 before I got here. And so that's actually what puts us, ahead of schedule, ahead of the COLA schedule. So, as you use the filter here and look at different departments, things that are out of the range Hopefully there'll be some notes there that explain, why we are out. I'm open to feedback, but I thought this might be a more concise model to use with some good comparisons there. So I'm happy to go through anything tonight you want to, but I thought, it might just make sense to, we've focused on the Cutler project. Now we've kind of come to a conclusion on that, and now it's time to turn our attention to the operating. So I thought, giving you this tool and having you able to play with it for, a week up until our next meeting and have some feedback, it would be the kind of the way to go. And then I'll show you what's also built in here is that I've tried to model out just 10 years. It's not fiscal 26 through fiscal 35. It's just year 1 through year 10, which basically takes the FY26 proposed operating budget, but it says let's pretend that the year 1 Cutler debt were to hit the budget in year 1. How does that look? And so that's where you can see, we're projecting to have a 1627 tax rate, and the impact of that first year debt service is to bring that up to 1845. So that's that 13.4% increase I was referencing with Angus a little while ago. But I think this is it's not a finished product, and it will definitely need lots of disclaimer language to say, this is for illustration purposes only. And, we're, lots and lots of assumptions have been made, 10 years out, but you can see, you're at 16 and, you could be at, almost 23 by the end of the 10-year period. The reality is we won't be at 23 because valuations will change over time. And, the amount of taxation raised will be the same, but this number will be probably won't be that high because valuations will continue to move upwards, hopefully. But for illustration purposes, I think this sort of got to what Dana was talking about. So I'm open to sort of feedback on that as well.
Jeff, would this be an appropriate place to introduce some of the comparisons that I started doing based on median household income for the various comparables, or you want to hold that?
Sure. I guess I'll defer to Finn a little bit on that in terms of whether we want to open up at 9:35 a more detailed discussion on that type of thing.
I was thought maybe just introduce the concept rather than the details.
Okay, let me just pull it up.
Jeff, you haven't sent that around yet, or you have?
No, I was going to send it out after the meeting. I was going to
Okay.
kind of quickly introduce it here and then send it out.
Got it. Making sure I didn't miss it.
Nope. All right. I'm having a little.
Well, he's doing that. Basically, the idea was to see how our expenses in total and in various categories compared to our comparables when you plotted them out in the scatter diagram based on the median household income of the communities, and then run a simple regression line through it. One of the general observations, it looks like if the median household income is higher, people are spending more in many categories. It may be because the costs are higher in the community. It may just because that the communities that have higher MHI just want to spend more on culture or other things.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
to read this. How, is this the right tab to start with?
You can start with the education, but I would go to the chart. It's farther down.
There we go.
I found the charts more interesting, and
Okay.
but I think there are a number of potential drivers. One thing is population density, which we have the data that we could compute and bring this into a discussion. The other one is what part of the tax for a community is covered by residential, because some of these places may in fact have a greater commercial revenue. So this was just to start thinking about what are the potential drivers, and you can do straight regression. The other thing you can do is multiple regression, trying to understand how things like
Mhm.
area and miles and the number of people and,
Mhm.
and the MHI density and other things contribute to see if you can get a better idea of how we stand to comparable communities when you consider the income level in the community.
Mhm.
And I would just leave it at that as it's kind of a point of looking for more metrics so that we can have a better handle on as we look at departments, and maybe in some cases not beat ourselves over the head too heavily because we're doing actually okay compared to other comparable communities in the same economic situation. And on the other hand, that doesn't say because you have the money you have to spend it. So we still could be looking at ways to reduce our costs.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is Jeff, you're going to send this work paper along with the one that you showed just a minute ago around to the group so we can take a look at it
Yes.
ahead of a call next week. Okay.
And we have started to, I've reached out to the police chief to, try to run down some of the information on some of the communities that we identified that, larger communities that were actually spending less in total dollars, than we were, just to get a sense of, what the differences might be. I've started reaching out to some of my colleagues to, compare and contrast my department and things like that. As I might have mentioned, it was like Bob, this is the harder part as it is, talking to every single town directly and understanding how they're staffed and how they're, what their sort of layout is in terms of how they're staffed and how their departments are structured and things like that. But we'll work to try to get as much information as we can on that to, to figure out, what is it that a town like West Newbury does, to be, to have lower spending, sort of across the board, than Wenham does, when on a lot of levels, they're a very similar community. I think, as Finn has said, moving forward, we're going to need to, be able to show that. So either we have to prove, we have to cut back because, what they're doing works, or we have to show what it is we're doing differently that is a larger cost driver.
So would you say it's still something that you would say, that we're going to be able to include in the warrant book or something like that this go around like a per capita expense?
We
with
can
some
certainly
kind of
include
information?
per capita, and I think we can, work to try and at least begin on some departments to answer some of those questions. But I think, we can put it, at least get it out there in the public space that, these are the numbers, these are our comps, and these are what they're doing. Here are some of the differences we've noticed, and it's going to be, I think, a good amount of work over the next year or so to to get every department where you can say we completely understand our comparison to who our legitimate comparable communities are. I think there's plenty that we'd say, that we are very similar on population or land size, but maybe not very similar on economic, factors and things like that. And I would imagine you folks in the select board would have a lot of input on what are the most appropriate comps. And I think, certainly we have comps that we use for compensation. So when we're hiring new people, who is it we look at, that we need to be thinking about when we're hiring a DPW person, who are our competitors for that person, and those are the folks we have to be, on a similar pay structure as to, to lower that DPW worker to Wenham instead of Danvers. But yeah, I think there can be some. I don't know that it would be, as fully blown out as we maybe like, but I think we can start the process, and I think we have to do that.
Great. All right. Do we have any other topics or things to cover here as we on the operating budget? Okay.
I think I'm good at this point.
All right, so I'm hoping that we can pivot to more about these sort of metrics for our next call here. All right. All right. So then the second or the next thing after the operating budget is the capital budget. I think again, Jeff, you've got a whole bunch of data to show us.
Yeah, so there is, let's go look at that.
By the way, everyone on the phone, I'm planning on being done before 10 o'clock, in case you're wondering how long we're gonna keep you on.
I thought that was intermission. All right, so let me just. All right, let's pull this up and hopefully this will. I will send this around as well. Oh, I'm hoping I can get this. There we go. There we go. All right, there you go. So I'm going to send this around to you as well. I am trying to get this deck on the Capitol lower than six megs, so it's not blowing up everybody's email. I was told today there's another one more small capital project for $2,000 that's going to be added. I guess they want to add some additional signage on some trails. At some of the walking trails or something like that. I'm waiting for more info, but obviously not a big material number. We didn't roll out this presentation completely at the select board meeting last night, but we have sort of a way we approach the capital is, we kind of lead off with, looking at last year and sort of what's the status of those projects. So you'll see that these are, largely either done or pretty much underway in most cases. The second page here is just, this is the capital list, minus that $2,000 addition that is coming. The big ticket item is the town hall HVAC project. We are trying to do a geothermal system with solar at town hall. The reason being, there's lots and lots of grant money available for geothermal projects, and if you back them up with a solar electrical component, that makes you more likely to get the grants. So we're taking that approach. The issue we have here is we're putting a potential $500,000 free cash use into the capital budget in the event that the Green Communities grant from the state of Massachusetts does not come through. And some of this is just protection against potential backlash from 3A. It is possible that communities that aren't 3A compliant may not be looked at as favorably as communities that are. So we need to have something on town meeting floor to address that if the grant doesn't come through in what should be in the next few weeks, to 3 to 4 weeks, I think. That's the biggest ticket item here. A couple of other big ones. There's $150,000 restoration of the ladder truck. I think I might have undersold it before, and David happened to mention and had some questions on it. But basically, we have an older ladder truck, and we've reached a point where we would either improve that and bring it up to, full code for, 2025, or buy a new ladder truck. And so because they've maintained this one well, they'll, send this out for a free, complete engine rebuild, a rebuild of the front axle, a lot of the systems to get those up to what is I think it's the NAPFA is the acronym for the folks that put forth the safety regulations around fire equipment. So for $150,000, you'd have a vehicle that was restored to be used for another 10 years or so. And just to put that in context, Wenham or Essex just bought a ladder truck for 1.2 million 2 years ago. or a year ago, and Manchester just had I think a $1.6 to $1.8 million ladder truck delivered earlier this fiscal year. So this 150,000 is certainly helping us avoid a much larger purchase. Under land use, you'll see there's two big studies that they're asking for funding for, both related to implementation of the master plan. The one here that says master plan implementation, the true description of this is a economic and housing comprehensive economic and housing study. And upon completion of that is the second follow-up study they want to do, which is this downtown vibrancy plan, again, to try to drive more economic development into town. I'm trying to think of some of the other big ticket items here. The police, add a new cruiser every year. That's sort of the policy they adopted, 15 years ago or so. They've been using Dodge Durangos. Dodge is getting out of the business of police SUVs. So we are going back to the Ford Interceptor, which is a, sort of like a Ford Explorer kind of base model with all the police Interceptor package with the turbochargers and the handling built up into it. That's in there for 75,000. In talking to the chief, he thinks we'd get 10 to 15,000 for the 2019 Tahoe we're going to trade in. So net there might only be 60 or 65 for that. And there's slides for all these afterwards that you'll see. The tasers, which are about 10 years old, are failing. We can't get parts for them anymore. And so the chief has determined we need to upgrade those. And so this would be a 5-year lease purchase / maintenance plan on new tasers here. But that's a $16,000 outlay for the next this year and four more years after that. There's a handful of just small, exterior painting at the fire department, doors and windows at the fire department, some small work at the Council on Aging. And all in, you're looking at $1.3 million in capital, one of which is a pickup truck in the water department that they'll pay for out of their own reserve. And just about 1.26 million will come out of free cash, as is Wenham's typical policy is to fund capital with free cash. We had free cash certified at $2,071,000. So this leaves, essentially $700,000 or so of free cash available after capital, should you decide to, recommend each and every one of these things after looking over these slides and determining if you have questions or, whether you do or don't support them. So this is just a high level look at it, but I'll send this deck out and you can, look at the individual slides. Let me know if you have any questions, and then we can move forward with that, but no tax rate impact here.
Jeff, I do have a few questions. Can you go back one slide? I just want to look at the total of the ones we approved last year was only $800,000, right? And so the big lift here is you might call it the $500,000, right? Is the major cause in the significant increase in capital. Now, if I recall correctly, we had when you have free cash that is not being used right now, we have the ability to kind of return it to everybody, by reducing the tax rate, right? Or like last year, we took that free cash and we put it in towards the pensions obligations, that sort of stuff. Do you have any of that sort of? You sounded like you had a 2 million versus 1.2 million, so like $700,000 or so of unused free cash. Do you have any of that kind of reserved in order for us to achieve the below 2.5% growth in operating expenses?
I don't have anything earmarked for, like, so let's call it that extra 700,000. I think that will be, once Well, I mean, right now we're under an override, so we're not in a situation where, we have to, necessarily use free cash to get under an override. Certainly, you folks as a committee can um, talk about if you wanted to use free cash to reduce the tax rate. You could decide, you would like to move some money just to help reduce the tax rate impact. We'll also look at, if you recall last year, a lot of OPEB, we just made sort of a decision to put money, I think it was about 300,000 extra dollars towards that. The idea being to lock it up rather than just have this $300,000 that was out there able to be spent and burning the proverbial hole in your pocket. So we took that and locked that up in OPEB to sort of help us catch up, because that is one area where we haven't really, we've got a plan for OPEB, but it hasn't been super aggressive. So I think we took an opportunity last year to sort of help correct that a little bit. And then we made a move to try to get the stabilization fund up to, a target of, something in the range of 5% of operating budget. So I would say, well, once we've kind of solidified the FY26 operating budget, that will adjust what our target for stabilization would be. And so I may at that point say, whatever, $80,000 would help us get to our stabilization target. So I would, recommend we do that. We do have one other use of free cash, which is likely to come up, which is probably, I'm thinking at this point, is probably going to be $50,000 of free cash, which would go into a brand new revolving fund for the ambulance. The revolving fund is a fund that is accessible for very specific purposes as laid out in the revolving fund. So in this case, it would be money would be available to pay essentially any bills related to the ambulance service. So we pay a billing company to do our billing. We pay when we have someone rides in an ambulance in Wenham. 87% of the time, it is what they call a BLS call, which is, so there's either an ALS call, which is advanced life support, or BLS is, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's less than advanced life support, which is really just the ability to run IVs and do those types of things. Wenham is not allowed, we're not certified to do that. So when on the 13% of our ambulance rides that involve an ALS service, that's when we share that with a Beauport or an Atlantic or some other ALS ambulance service. So we have to pay, when we get paid, we have to pay them their cut of the ride, so to speak. And so having this revolving fund would just give the ambulance the ability to rectify a timing issue we have, because we might give the ambulance ride in FY25 and we might not get paid for the ride until FY26. And what ends up happening is you end up hitting your current year budget for things that happen in a prior year. So this revolving fund would rectify that, and it would also help them save money towards a new ambulance, and also help them, in a pinch, buy supplies or things that arise related to the ambulance. So that's one use of free cash that is likely to come up. There's not many others. I think the rest of them would be decisions you folks would make in terms of how you wanted to lock that money up. Another part of that discussion, Finn, would be, as we've heard in some of the meetings we've had over at Bucher, next year might be particularly challenging. So we may want to reserve some of this, just hold some of this to help with kind of mitigating the tax rate increase next year. So that might be something. And then also, as we work towards settling this trash contract, that's going to be, we already in talking with just the folks who what we call the tipping fee, the people who take our trash, that's looking to be, probably a 12 to 14% increase next year. So we may want to set aside some free cash that will help us buffer the one-time large increase, use some free cash to kind of buffer that over a couple of years to kind of normalize that big increase for taxpayers. So that, that might be something else we want to consider, is to have some of this available either to use to offset the tax rate in 26 or potentially 27, 28, 29 as some of these, other issues come up, like trash, which we know is a big one that's coming down the pike.
All right. So
But
Jeff,
yeah, other than
I
that,
appreciate that, and I'm just looking at the clock. So I want to give
Okay.
some of the other committee members an opportunity to react. Can you go to the next slide to this list?
Yeah.
I think I'd like you to send it out so that we can have it in hand.
Yeah.
But I just, like I said, I want to give the committee members any sort of reaction. First pass at this. So if there aren't any reactions, then I really want to just go and try to schedule the next meeting and try to get us to close this meeting, on around 10 o'clock. So I don't know where people's heads are at for next Wednesday meeting. Are we going to try to do 8 o'clock again?
I mean, I prefer earlier, but I'm retired. I understand people have commitments, so.
You're saying next Wednesday?
Yep. I think the week following is a school vacation week. I'm going to be out of the country, so it might be difficult for me to attend.
I'm open next Wednesday anytime.
It works for me.
Okay.
I'm somewhat tentative for next Wednesday, but I'm planning to attend, but probably 50-50. But moving it won't help me, so.
Okay. So is there a preferred time? Otherwise, we do 8 o'clock.
7 for me, but I'm happy with 8, whatever works for everyone else. But again, don't plan around me, the guy who's 50-50.
All right, Jared, you were saying you prefer a little earlier, so we want to try to do 7.
That would be great.
Okay. All right. So Jeff, if you would get ready to send out a placeholder for the clerk to comply with the open meeting laws, and I think probably what we'll see on there is hopefully a final version of the deck, and we won't spend much time on it, hopefully, and then we'll go into the operating and capital budget topics.
And I would just say on the operating, as you're playing with the spreadsheet and you have questions, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, text me, call me, whatever, and I'll try to answer as much as I can in real time. So we can make it productive for you folks next week.
Sounds great, Jeff. All right, guys. I'd like to I will make a motion to end and close the Wenham Finance Advisory Committee meeting at 10 o'clock Wednesday, February 25th. Looking for a second.
Second.
That's Jared giving a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any discussion. We'll move to a vote. I'll say aye.
All
Bye.
right.
David,
Bob,
I.
aye. Dave, aye.
Dano, yes.
Dano, yes. All right, so that's 5 aye votes. None against, no abstentions. Thanks very much. Motion carries. So I think we're closed.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you,
Appreciate all of
guys.
your time here, guys.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Finn.
All
You
right.
too.